All right, hey, what's up, y'all? Here today to talk about a really important and interesting concept, and that is perception and acceptance. All right, something that those of us that have been meditating and practicing mindfulness for a while, have to practice on a regular basis. And for those of us that are relatively new to this, we've probably heard something along the lines of these concepts, but it's still really good information to learn because it gives us something to work with and make ourselves a little bit happier. And remember, we've already talked about being healthy and feeling amazing is supposed to be our default. When we figure out real food and we get sun every day, we go to bed on time, and we move a little bit and we get sweaty most days, the way that we feel from all that is the way that we're meant to be, right? That's why our tagline is rediscover how we're meant to live, because we get that stuff in place, and most of us just our life is on a different level. We feel like it, but it should be this way. We're just trying to get back to ground zero. So then remember, the reason that we want to implement some kind of a meditation or mindfulness practice is because in this modern world, assuming that we feel amazing, because of the different things that we're doing to be healthy, we have the craziness of this. We have so many different things in this modern world that are different from how our ancestors used to live. And remember, we talked about this habituation to thinking that we have. And this habituation to thinking causes all kinds of problems. And it's the reason for the majority of our suffering. So remember, we got to make health a priority. We got to focus on eating real food. We'd recommend doing it our way, and making sure that you're getting sun most days, and that you're going to bed on time, and you do the things that you need to do to facilitate sleep, and that you're exercising. And then something like a daily practice, like what we're learning together, is going to be extremely beneficial to work with the craziness of this right here. And then also having, and that daily practice, by the way, includes meditation. And then also having daily mindfulness tools that we can use as we go throughout the rest of our day. We're practicing when we sit, and we're practicing as we go about our day using these different mindfulness tools. And this is really just about being as happy as we possibly can and living the best life, the most amazing life that we possibly can. All right, so that's why we're trying to cover this and go through all this stuff. So on this topic of perception and acceptance, there's a book that I've read and that I absolutely love. I've read it at least 6 times. I've recommended it to a lot of people. I've gifted it to some people, and it's called Zen and the Art of Happiness. And I read a lot of books, so I've read a lot over my years. I used to do insurance sales, so I did a lot of, self-help, positive thinking, goal-setting type books. And in the beginning of this book, there's a quote that the author's kind of famous for, and the quote is, "Everything that happens to me is the best possible thing that can happen to me." And of course, when I first, I'm listening to the first part of this book and I hear this quote and I hear some of the verbiage around it, in my mind, I'm just like, all right, here we go again. Here's another positive thinking book. Here is another, even though your life and situation or, whatever has happened to you is completely miserable, you're going to pretend that things are okay, right? This is another one of those books, right? But it's not, because it goes into some really, really good stuff. And they use an analogy. I think they use this analogy, maybe I came up with it myself. If we have a football game, let's say we have the Super Bowl, which I don't really care about the Super Bowl, so it may not be the best example for me, but let's just assume that I did. We have the Super Bowl, and me and a bunch of my friends are rooting for this team, and the team wins, and we get all excited and we're happy about it and we celebrate, right? And you kind of forget that there's this whole other team and a whole other fan base that did not win, and they're just as upset as we are happy about the results of the game. And it's interesting because when you think about it, the game itself did not carry happiness or non-happiness in it, right? The game itself was an event, and it's how we chose to see that game that determined our happiness or non-happiness. And this is an analogy for any and every life situation that happens. There's a certain amount of life that it is as it is, and then the suffering and the struggle comes with what we add on top of it, and what we choose to perceive as far as the results of the situation, right? We have to understand that the way that our unconscious or non-conscious or higher self works, whatever you want to call that, is that our self-talk determines what we're looking for in our environment. So whatever I'm saying to myself, my unconscious, non-conscious, higher self starts to look for evidence to support that thing that I say to myself on a regular basis. So the way that I choose to talk to myself and the way that I choose to perceive events that happen is going to determine my happiness or non-happiness, okay? So the way that we work with this is, number one, you have to notice that you're caught. You have to notice that you're resisting something that is. That's kind of tricky to do, because when you're in it, you're in it. You know, me and my friends and the people that meditate on a regular basis, and we talk about mindfulness concepts, it's like when you're in the fog, when you're in the cloud, you're in the fog and you're in the cloud. It's really hard to see. But this is one of our goals on a daily basis, is to see what's happening. So this is why we meditate, because we want to see what's happening. So the first step is noticing that you're caught, or noticing that you're resisting the present moment. And how do we notice? Well, first of all, if you're frustrated or upset or pissed off, or wish things were different, then you're caught. You're resisting the present moment. You're resisting what is. So when you acknowledge that, I think in and of itself, that changes things, right? So this is why we have to meditate, because meditation is a practice session for seeing what's happening throughout the rest of the day. If I can sit in a sitting session and focus on listening to sounds in my environment, or feeling my body, or focusing on my breath, and on the backdrop of that focus, if I can notice myself thinking or lost in thought or talking to myself, as soon as I notice that and decide to come back deliberately to whatever my focus is, that's a practice moment, it's a training moment, that's a repetition. And if I do that in a short meditation session every day, then I cultivate this capacity to see what's happening throughout the rest of my life, right? So we have to see what's happening, meaning we have to see ourselves resisting the present moment and being upset and being caught. So again, a clear indicator is when you're upset and pissed off and frustrated and wanting things to be different than they are, right? And the way that we see that happening is with meditation in this little practice session in the moment. It's almost like when you go into meditation, you can have a conversation with yourself about how beneficial this practice session is, because it's cultivating this capacity to see what's happening. And again, if I notice myself resisting the present moment or resisting what is, that in and of itself is very powerful, because it's like this aha moment. You know, just like in meditation, when I notice myself thinking, temporarily I'm not thinking. So as I'm sitting and I have my focus and I notice myself talking to myself, all of a sudden I'm not talking to myself. Well, if I notice myself upset and frustrated and pissed off and resisting the present moment, all of a sudden I'm not. Now that may just come right back again, and then you can use some other tools. This is when we can work with it. So as soon as we see what's happening, now we have this chance to work with it. And I'm just going to go through a few recommendations and some ideas and some things that I've worked with private clients on and work with myself, because I have to work with this stuff all day, every day. I'm just like everybody else, okay? Number one, giving whatever it is space and letting it breathe, maybe not doing anything or not responding for a little bit, can help bring clarity. Right? So a lot of times we get triggered and something happens and we feel this immediate urge or rush to do something, and sometimes the best thing to do is just to give it some space and not say or not do anything. I'm not saying like procrastinate and let that linger for too long, but I think you understand what I'm saying, right? Also just asking yourself, like, what can be done? What must be done? What is the good or right thing to do in this situation? And really sitting with it. You don't have to have the answer to it immediately, but you can ask the question, and it will force your unconscious, non-conscious, higher self to look for the answer to support that question. All right. Sometimes I think it's extremely beneficial to look at a situation from an outsider's perspective. All right. So if you're in this situation and you have a life event, whatever it is, and you're having a hard time with it or you're resisting it in some way, step outside of that and look at yourself from the outside. Look at yourself in this situation as if you were the star of a movie and you're watching this movie or you're watching this play, and you were going to give advice to this person. Like, what advice would you give to this person? How would you ask them to react? How would you recommend that they react or respond to this situation? In a very good, kind-hearted way. You know, I think that's a really, really good exercise. You know, or if you were giving advice to a friend in the exact same situation, all of a sudden, a lot of times, the solution or what you need to do becomes very clear when you take yourself out of it or when you look at it from an outsider's perspective, okay? Also, having this attitude and perspective of what good can come out of this? What evolution can I experience that's on the other side of this? You don't have to have the answers. Again, like just asking the question can be very freeing. And just having this expectation that you're going to have a learning and an evolution coming out of this, right? I've been in many dark holes, and I've done this long enough that I have the wisdom that when I'm in the dark hole, I know that there's going to be a point at which I come out of this, and some of my greatest evolution and learning and life experiences come on the other side of some of our greatest challenges and difficulties, right? So it helps to give gratitude for the evolution, learning, and wisdom that's going to come out of whatever it is that you're going through in that moment, right? So, and man, we could take this to so many examples, like things that are just don't seem to be that important. Let's say I had a flat tire not too long ago, right? And I don't know how most people respond to flat tires, but I know how I would have responded years ago. You know, when I say years ago, like 10, 15, 20 years ago, like I would have gotten really upset about it. Always a helicopter going over when I try to film something. So if I had a flat tire, you know, years ago, I would have gotten upset about it. It would have ruined my day, okay? But I had a flat tire, and actually I was on my way to a meditation, a sunrise meditation, and I mean, it is as it is, you know, I can't really do anything about it. So I get on the phone, I try to stop at a gas station to air it up. I get on the phone and message the people that I'm supposed to be meditating with, and I say, hey, can I FaceTime myself in and see if we can do it that way? And we did. It was great. It was awesome. It was actually really cool. And then I have a, what do you call it, roadside assistance with USA, and called them up, and they came and helped me change my tire. So, I mean, why get upset about it, right? It's just something that you have to deal with. I remember years ago when I first moved to Vegas, my power went out. And my power went out for a few days, and everything in my freezer went bad. And because I didn't notice it until I came home after a long day, and it was really, really hot. So a lot of food went bad, and of course, like I could have gotten upset about it. Maybe I temporarily did for a moment. But, you know, I looked at it as an opportunity to clean that whole freaking thing out and revamp everything. And that was one of my turning points on getting like a lot of this approved stuff, you know, out of my diet, like the ice creams and things made with the right ingredients. So I mean, those are kind of minute examples. Now, if you go through something, you know, that's very debilitating, you know, like a heartbreak, you know, or a breakup, or even just a relationship issue. I think relationships are some of the greatest teachers. Those things are very difficult to deal with, but even in those situations, you have to look at it as, let's say that for whatever reason you've got some conflict going on with someone, or someone doesn't want to be with you, or someone has a problem with you. You know, I don't know. I mean, there's a million different degrees of that, but if you were looking at this from an outsider's perspective and trying to give this person advice on how to respond and how to react, what would you say? What would you say to that person? What is the best way for that person to respond? And usually your answer becomes pretty clear, you know. So again, to recap everything that we just talked about, this is just a little, some suggestions as far as how to handle a situation that comes up that you're resisting, right? Number one, you want to notice that you're resisting it. How do we cultivate the capacity to notice that we're resisting it? Well, you meditate every morning the way that we're talking about, right? So remember, meditation is practice for everyday life. Meditation, as I notice myself thinking and come back to my focus, I'm cultivating my capacity to see what's happening throughout the rest of the day, right? This happens automatically, but we can also have this deliberate intention that we're going to notice ourselves getting caught up or resisting the present moment, right? As soon as I notice that, I can celebrate. I'm like, oh, it's almost like aha, here I am. There I go again, right? And then you can give it a little bit of space. Let it breathe, you know. How do you do that? Well, come back to the present moment. Focus on what's in front of you. Notice your tendency to keep brooding over whatever it is that's triggered you, and keep coming back to the present moment. Keep coming back to your work. Keep coming back to whatever it is that's in front of you, and that will help you move through it a little bit, right? Then you can also ask your question, expecting the answer but not knowing the answer right away. What can be done? What must be done? What is the right thing to do? What is the good thing to do? Right? Also, maybe look at it from an outsider's perspective. If I were viewing this as a movie and I were giving myself advice, what advice would I give myself? Or if I was giving advice to my friend, what advice would I give my friend in this situation? Right? Expect good and expect evolution and wisdom in every situation, no matter how horrible or horrific it may seem. On the other side of that is some of your greatest growth and evolution. And give gratitude for the evolution, learning, and wisdom that you know is going to come out of that, right? That will help you change your perspective. A couple of other really good little points and topics that I think I'll probably make a separate video on, but the first one is understanding that there's wisdom in uncertainty and insecurity, okay? Meaning that I don't want to know what is supposed to be happening. I don't want to know what the future holds. All right, I can have these expectations and I can have these goals and I can have these things that I want to move towards, but I have to have detachment from the results because I want to have flexibility and I want to move through life understanding that in any given moment there is an infinity of possibilities that can happen to me, right? In a good way too, right? So I don't want to be certain about what's happening in the future or how things are going to turn out because that's where all the excitement and adventure in life is, right? So there's a wisdom in uncertainty and insecurity, right? The key, I think, is having this expectation of evolution and learning and wisdom and great things coming, right? Because if I have an expectation for something else, remember, whatever we say to ourselves is the search criteria that we're giving our unconscious, non-conscious, or higher self, and we look for evidence of that in our environment. All right, so if I have an expectation of learning and wisdom and great things, then with that expectation in uncertainty, great things tend to happen. That's the way it works, right? Also, understanding that there's no such thing as a wrong turn, there's only new turns. Every time I make a decision, every time anything happens, every time I decide something, then it opens up a whole new set of possibilities. So again, we are here today because of, or in spite of, all of our previous life decisions, including our worst decisions, right? We're still here. So understanding that there is no such thing as a wrong turn, there's only a new turn that opens up a new set of possibilities. And again, those possibilities are going to be determined by how I choose to perceive the situation and how I choose to learn and grow from it. Okay? All right. I think that's all I got for y'all today. Keep it real.